Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Band Life podcast, or part 3 of our All Things Spotify series. Now, in this episode, we talk about how music streaming should be done, how the platforms should be. So without further ado, here's episode 13. Band Life podcast! You are listening to the Band Life Podcast, your number one guide on how to run a profitable band. Here are your hosts, Pete Stannard and Adam West, the Wizard of Rock! Do you want to hear what Pete's streaming platform would look like? Or as I call it, Peteify. If you're enjoying this podcast and you're a generous soul, which I'm sure you are, why not buy Adam and myself a cup of coffee? You could do that at buymeacoffee.com/the Band Life podcast. Pete's streaming platform. This is what I would do if I had a streaming platform. Okay, this is how I would run it. If I was Daniel Ek, PT Ek, I wouldn't have free. I think you probably get that from my last rant. I wouldn't have free accounts. It would be subscription only. I'm going to give you a little bit of a pre-warning. Some of this you may not like at all, to be brutally honest with you, Adam.
Paul, but Pete, it doesn't matter because this is Pete and his world.
So it would be subscription only, okay? So this platform, subscription only, but I would have plans. So I'd have a basic plan, and the plans would be assigned to genres.
Oh.
So you wouldn't have unlimited music. So a basic plan, you could choose like a genre to listen to. Okay. And then a mid plan, 3 to 5 genres. And then you'd have like an unlimited plan. It's like the upper echelons of the plan system. If you want. Now,
snobby bastard.
I know. But with the more basic plans, obviously you're going to have a limited number of streams. So you're paying for the streams, okay? But the listener sets the number of streams at the start, and then you can increase that as much as you want going forward, okay? So, for example, just in case that seems a bit complicated, but for example, and this isn't real world numbers or monies or anything like that, okay? So let's say a subscription is £10 a month and a stream is worth 10p. So then the listener will have 100 streams for that month. If you want 101, you've got to pay a little bit more. You've got to pay 10p more, whatever. So you're paying for volume of streams as such, and volume of streams within that genre or genres, depending on what plan you've got. Okay, because 100 streams, you're going to get through 100 streams pretty quickly. So, but yeah, that, like I say, they weren't real world numbers, but it's just for the sake of that example. But I would attach a store to the artist profile and make it really easy for fans to buy physical stuff, to buy merch, and even gig tickets. They could literally, and when I'm saying simple, all they have to do is click one button and then go, yes, I agree, and that's it. Right. You don't have a checkout, you don't have any of that crap, okay? Which you shouldn't need because you've got their card details and stuff from the sign up. Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, how are you getting their subscription each month? Okay. So very simple kind of thing. But I'd also have subscription button so that you can do your mailing lists and stuff like that. And I'd have a donation button as well of some sort. So you can, if you want to give your artists a bit more, a bit like the buy me a cup of coffee sort of thing.
Yep.
And kind of the overall look of the site would be more like a record shop than how Spotify do it, with just a list of artists and stuff like that. So you could, you go into categories, and you could even kind of flip through artists' artwork and stuff like that, just to bring the artist artwork more to the fore. I think that artwork gets really forgotten in Spotify.
Yeah, I mean, this. Okay, go on. I'll comment after.
That's kind of the listener side of it, as such. Right. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a great idea. I think you should patent it before somebody else does.
I should do that, yeah. For the artist side of it, I would have direct uploads. So I wouldn't have the DSPs. I would cut them out completely. I honestly think they're a complete waste. They don't actually do anything, I don't think.
Well, they distribute your music everywhere where it's listenable, don't they?
Yeah.
DistroKid.
But there's no real control of... I always make a joke of... I could fart into a can and get it onto Spotify. Yeah. As long as the file types are right and the bit rates are there. They go through this kind of 2 weeks of monitoring. That's purely just to see if there's a licensing problem or something like that. They don't care about the quality of stuff going out. I literally listened to some stuff the other day, and it was so bad. The production of it was just horrible.
So it begs the question, and why do we have it? Why do we have the DSPs?
But obviously, I would use the user-centric royalty system. But to keep the majors happy, which you kind of have to kind of buck a little bit, as a kind of a third, like you say, the third option there, is that I would pull the money from the genres as opposed to the whole industry. So because everything is done genre, payments going in are genre specific. You know exactly how much money is going into that pool for that genre, and then it's distributed from there, as opposed to all of the money's coming in as one big pot and everything's going out. Unless, and I think this will happen at some point, that the majors will move to just a user-centric system at some point anyway. So unless that comes in the meantime, I would do things more genre-specific, just to give those artists within that genre a bit more money as such. So hopefully that would top that up slightly. Obviously, I'd have the analytical data about listeners, but I would also have about the genre as well. So Spotify is pretty good for your fans as such, like who's listened where and all of this. But they don't say, like, from a genre-wide perspective, this amount, these people have come from more from TikTok than Instagram, for example, so on and so forth. So I'd have a much broader perspective as well on that. So that you can then kind of target your marketing or tweak your marketing better. I would also have an option of having your streaming numbers displayed. And there's a part of me that's like, well, why do we need to know how many streams the Shallow Souls have had? How many monthly streams you've got? Why does that need to be up there? I think it's important that you know it as an artist, but for someone listening to you, why do they need to know that? Because I think there's also a psychological part of, only like 100 people have listened to these guys this month, so they're not very popular, so I'm not going to listen, sort of thing. And it's a bit, for me, I think that's kind of a little bit off-putting in a way.
So you wouldn't put it up there?
Because the other scale to that is that if someone sees that you've got 1 million monthly listeners, they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, so these guys are really popular, so I'm going to sort of, I will dig more into these people than I would someone who's only got like 100, 150 monthly listeners or something like that, if that makes sense. Whereas if you didn't have anything there at all, then it's kind of a level playing field. But I would keep it as an option, I suppose.
I like the idea of the artwork and all that, because I think sometimes, for me anyway, if I'm looking around for stuff, I'm a visual person, so I visually get drawn to some artwork. I'm like, that looks cool. I want to listen to that.
Yeah. So when you go onto the site, you would have you would only see obviously the genre that you've selected or genres that you selected, and you would select by artwork, if that makes sense. So that's why I said I would have it visually more like a record shop where you would be flipping through flipping through vinyls and stuff like
That's
that.
cool. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, because I think the psychological part of it is much more appealing, as it were, than just sort of, a weird kind of band picture or something like that. Yeah, as a little sort of thumbnail sort of thing, that little circle thing you get on Spotify whenever you sort of do a search. I would also obviously have a higher royalty percentage, but I will be able to do that because the top earners at Peteify will have their wages capped so that money can be distributed back into the music industry.
Clever.
Yeah, call me a socialist.
No.
Some people might do. But I think the biggest problem, the reason that Spotify is, earning all this money, but each year going, well, we're skint and we have to lay off thousands of people. I think last year they laid off 2,000 people.
Who did?
Spotify.
Bandcamp did as well, didn't it?
Yeah. And I think mainly that's because you have the top earners at Spotify. Daniel Ek, he is one of the many CEOs or the top parts of Spotify. And last year, guess how much he earned?
I don't even want to think about it.
$350 million.
What did he do?
He sat in his Bond villain cave going, "Wah! I have lots of money." So, yeah, his yearly wage is around about $350 million. The guy's worth $5 billion. And it's just like, well, how much money do you need? The other thing that I would do, and this is the thing that I think you're not going to be happy about, Mr. West.
Oh, come on, man.
Is I would still have streaming thresholds. And I know this is going to be really unpopular. My thresholds would be different from Spotify. I wouldn't have thresholds for royalties. I would have thresholds for streaming numbers. And this is purely to try and control the saturation in the market. So the thresholds are there to if you can physically stay on the site. Obviously, because I want to give the artists 100% of their royalties. I don't think you should have 1,000 streams and then start earning money. I think that just seems a bit silly. If you're not hitting certain numbers of streams, then you're going to have to go somewhere else. I'm sorry to be harsh. And I know it sounds harsh. And it's not like it would be an exodus that you're never welcome back. It would be a case of in 6 months, come back to us and we'll try again. But you have to be hitting, and I haven't quite thought what the thresholds would be. They'll probably be quite low because I'm a bit
You're a tight
good at
ass.
this sort of thing. They would be low just because I want to keep people on. But it's more that you've got one of two issues. If you're not got streaming numbers that will be even like the 1,000 thresholds for streaming, you've got one of two problems there. Either your marketing isn't good enough, or your music's not very good. I hate to be harsh about this.
It's being a bit harsher, Pete.
I know, and yeah, okay. But I think it's the reality of if people don't like your music, then that's probably why they're not listening to it. That's one thing. The other the reason that people might not be listening to your music is because they just don't know you exist. Now, to counter that, on the other side of it, I would have free educational tools on music production standards, how to market your music, and how to work with the algorithm and for playlisting and stuff like that, because I would still have playlists.
So you're asking bands to work a little harder on their craft and what they do in order to get listens.
No, essentially, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing.
If they like the platform you're on.
If they like the platform, yeah. I think that's kind of what it.
Yeah, okay. Well, what does our own listeners think about that one?
Yeah, I'd like to, if you've got any comments, throw some comments about that. I would love to hear what your thoughts are about possibly being taken off a website or off a streaming site because your streaming numbers aren't high enough.
Wouldn't
Now,
people
you've got to
go,
I'm
okay,
coming
okay.
at this from a saturation point of view, because I think the problem with Spotify regarding saturation is that there's so many artists on it that just put music out and they don't do anything beyond that. And you've probably got so much music on there that's just kind of dormant, you know, because bands just, the artists either don't exist anymore or they just haven't taken them down. And the reason that Spotify wants this oversaturation is because of advertising. So they could turn around to advertise. Like what I said previously, the numbers have to be high to get a high advertising revenue, because the more people you have on your site, the more those advertisers have to pay to put their adverts onto your site. They want that level of saturation to be high. But because I don't have any advertising, I don't need the level of that saturation level to be high. So it can be a little bit more like, and I don't want it to come across as me going, oh, well, you're just shit, get off. It's more of a point of, well, maybe you're just not quite ready to be releasing music yet. Maybe just be thinking along the lines of, is this song ready to be released? And how am I going to release this so that my streaming numbers are high enough for me to stay on the platform? And you've kind of got that balancing act there that needs to be addressed. And for me, it sounds harsh for me to even say it.
It sounds risky.
It does. But I think it's kind of a risk that has to be at least addressed. Not necessarily taken, but addressed, of how do you control the level of saturation that the industry has? Because the DSPs, they're not regulating this stuff. Even though they have their kind of, periods of, oh, we're just checking the music. So, you're checking licenses. You're checking that you're not going to get sued at the end of the day. That's all you're doing. So if I can release me farting in a can, I mean, is that a piece of music? At the end of the day, is that good enough to be released as a piece of music? And why should that add to the level of saturation that the artists who are, like yourself, who are invested, who want to do the best they can and release music properly, why should that level of saturation pull you down with everything else? And I think that this is at least a way, whether it's the best way, maybe someone can come up with a better way of addressing the saturation. Please leave that in the comments. I would love to hear that. I can't really think of another way of doing it apart from saying, absolutely, you've tried, you had a good crack. Why don't you go away, have a little rethink about what you're doing, look at everything that's going on. And, if the platform can even make some suggestions, that's what I'm saying about the free educational tools and stuff like that, as to why you're being taken off site and what you can do to improve things, and then come back to us, in a few months or whenever, and we'll have another go at it. Let's work together and move you guys forward, rather than you just throw everything out and hope that some shit sticks somewhere. And I think that's probably a better way of doing it. Back in the day when you had physical copies, and you had the record companies were gatekeepers, but they were also filtering out a lot of the crap that just would never be in a record shop, because they would never make that investment. It would just be a bad thing. If music sounds bad, you would never make a record of bad music. It just doesn't make sense. But I've heard so many albums that just sound awful. Like the production quality just isn't anywhere near what it should be for it to be even released as a piece of music.
It's a great way to get people to go to what you're doing, at least, and you can offer some support there.
Yeah, like I say, it's not just like a blanket kind of, oh, I think you're not good enough, f off sort of thing. It's more, you need to, you gave it a try. What we can do is we'll sit down together and try to work out how we can move you forward as such. And whether or not that's a case of, you need to learn to sing, you need to learn to play guitar, you need to learn, how to mix and master properly and all this other stuff that goes into making a production, a decent production, then we can help you with that. We can give you advice for that, but you're going to have to do the heavy lifting, I'm not going to sit there and mix and master stuff for you, certainly for nothing. I'd happily give you links for different studios and different producers and things like that. All that sorts of all the educational resources that you need, and that would all be a part of the site. Well, it will be part of the artist side of the site. I don't think the listeners particularly need to do that. So it'd be much more of an inclusive point rather than it being a specifically harsh thing of you suck, go away.
I mean, I think the fact that you're offering, because there is a standard in terms of quality when it comes to the music.
And within that genre, of course there is. And obviously different. You'd have to, as a company, you'd have to run it by genre. So different departments will run their own genres, but everything is more genre specific as such. So the people who are talking about metal know about metal music. I'm not going to put a hip hop artist onto someone who plays classical, if that makes sense. But that's where I would come from to try and temper the saturation problem. The other side is playlisting. So obviously have listener playlists. They'll be generated by the listeners. But I'd have monetization options for playlist curators.
Interesting.
Because I think another problem is that you get curators that want paying to be put onto their playlists. Don't ever do that. It's something that Spotify hates, and you will be taken down. That it is a sackable offence if you pay to be put on someone's playlist. So this shouldn't be a thing, but it is. But instead of kind of going, oh, it's a bad thing and the rest of it, I would have monetization options. So if you've got X amount on your playlist, or you've got X amount of monthly listeners or something like that on your playlists, then you can start earning money that way through the site itself. And obviously the other side of it is I'd have editorial playlists that will be generated by the staff members within those genres and stuff like that. And that is essentially how I would run a music streaming site.
When do I sign up, Pete?
Whenever you can develop it. As I say, I have no idea how how to build this stuff out, but that's what I would do. That's how I would run things. Rightly or wrongly, please leave comments in there. But I honestly think that it finds a nice balance between the listeners, the artists, the record labels and record companies and so on and so forth. So that everyone gets a decent chunk of the money. Whatever money is filtered through the company gets put back into the industry, which I think is an important part of whatever you do.
I don't disagree. Very interesting.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you're feeling a bit generous, why not buy Adam and myself a cup of coffee? You can do that at buymeacoffee.com/The Band Life Podcast.
Band Life Podcast!